Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Deborah Uber, the Education Coordinator for the Embryo Adoption Awareness Center, and we are really excited to have you all here today and very pleased to bring you the webinar, Snowflakes Through the Years. We have a lot of great families sharing their stories today. But before we get started, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation using the questions you submit through the Q&A feature. You may submit your questions at any time during the session, and we will answer as many as possible at the end of the presentation. To ask a question, simply click on the Q&A panel in the lower right-hand portion of the screen. Type your question into the dialog box and click the Send button. If you happen to be in the full screen view, you can click on the question mark icon on the toolbar on the lower right-hand corner of the screen. This will open the Q&A panel on your screen only. When you submit your question, it will be visible to all of the panelists, but not visible to other attendees. We expect this presentation to last approximately 45 minutes with 15 minutes for Q&A. We will be distributing a copy of today's presentation and a comprehensive list of answers to any questions submitted today during the webinar. If you experience any technical difficulties during the presentation, please contact WebEx Technical Support at 866-229-3239. And just as a reminder, this presentation is being recorded today. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our three lovely families that we have sharing today. They've been so kind to take out time out of their day to share their experience and stories with you. So first up, we have Blaine and Kathryn sharing their story, but unfortunately, they have had a sick kiddo, so Blaine won't be able to join us today, but they'll be sharing their story first, followed up by Mike and Michelle, and then Travis and Annette. So let me go ahead and get them ready to go. Thank you so much, Kathryn, for joining. I don't think I had you unmuted. All right, there you go. Thank you so much, Kathryn, for joining us today.
Hi.
All right, I'll go ahead and just let you open up the floor. Blaine and Kathryn actually met in 2000 and were married in 2005, and you started the adoption process about a year and a half ago, right?
Yep, that's right.
All right, well, yeah, you go ahead and just share whatever you feel comfortable with.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I guess we'll just kind of start from the beginning. We have 4 kiddos and are currently 35 weeks pregnant with our 5th, which is our snowflake baby. I think adoption in general has been something that's really just been important to us, and I think something that just God has put on our hearts, because after we had our first 3 kids who are biological, we knew that we were going to grow our family through adoption, and so that's where our 4th came from, and he was actually adopted in 2012 just via traditional adoption. And so, yeah, and after he was a few years old, we knew adoption was in the plans again, and so we just really started praying and discussing, and we actually stumbled upon embryo adoption kind of on an accident at first, and yeah, to be honest, I think at first we kind of blew it off at first because to us, we didn't know much about it, and it just kind of, it seemed futuristic or something like that. And so at first we just kind of were like, what? Didn't even know that was possible. And I think even at the time, I'm not sure we even fully understood what IVF was, let alone embryo adoption and how all that worked. So it was just a lot of new information, and the more we just prayed and talked about it, the more we just felt like that was the direction God was taking us, and so that was where we were going to go. And so I think at that point it was just lots of just research and learning. We just kind of wanted to get a good grasp and just fully understand before we just dove in, and so that's what we did. We just kind of educated ourselves about it and learned all we could, and yeah. Anyways, and so yeah, I remember after we had a good understanding about what embryo adoption was and just how the whole process worked from start to finish, it was very exciting. I mean, there's lots of very neat aspects to embryo adoption that, yeah, seemed very neat. And so at that point, that's when we contacted the Snowflake program, and yeah, since we had done an adoption for our fourth child, we had already had a home study done. And so all we really had to do with that was what they call an update, which essentially was just updating some paperwork, background checks, and all that kind of stuff. And so that part didn't really take all that long for us. And after that, we were off and ready for matching. And so, yeah, we started the matching process. And for us, that was pretty simple and pretty fast, actually. We were very open as to what embryos we would be matched with. I think really the only preference we really had was the number of embryos we wanted to adopt. Since we had 4 kids already, we had decided that we didn't want more embryos than we were comfortable transferring in one transfer. And that number for us personally was 2. And so that's what we were matched with. We were matched with a set of day 3 embryos, and yeah, went on and did all the paperwork and all that fun stuff, and they were shipped to our clinic, and that's when we started to prepare for our first frozen embryo transfer. For us, I think that looked a little bit different than most because we were actually able to do what they call a natural cycle transfer. Most people have to do medicated, where it's a combo of meds and shots are given just to prepare your body for the embryos and implantation. But in our case, I was actually so regular that we were really able to just keep track of my cycle, and with some testing, able to get the exact day I naturally ovulated, and then from there just transfer the embryos on the day that an embryo would have naturally entered the uterus. And so really for us, there wasn't tons of prepping or appointments at the clinic, and yeah, so it was really just a matter of once our embryos got to the clinic, we just kind of had to wait for that perfect timing. So that's what we did, and transfer day came, and we went in, and we were told that 1 embryo did not survive the thaw, and obviously we were bummed about that, but we had known ahead of time that that was definitely a possibility, especially considering our set of embryos was pretty old, and so we knew that was a possibility. And so they transferred the embryo, and we just hoped and prayed for the best, and I think it was about 2 weeks later that our clinic had a blood draw set up to see if a pregnancy had resulted, and actually, to our surprise, I was pregnant, but my numbers didn't look good. They were a lot lower than they should have been at that point, and so they said, okay, we'll come back in 2 days and we'll do another blood draw and see what your numbers are doing. And so I went back in, and the second blood draw confirmed that my numbers were actually dropping instead of rising like they should have been. And it ended in what they call a chemical pregnancy, which really is just a pregnancy that ends in a very early miscarriage. Our doctor had said that most likely the embryo probably had a genetic abnormality, and that it did implant but wasn't able to survive, and so it had probably just quit growing, and that my body would recognize that and miscarry. And just to clarify, we were told that that happens in natural pregnancies all the time as well. So yeah, and so I think at that point we were pretty bummed. We spent a lot of time, a lot of thought, a lot of prayer into these babies, and it just seemed like that fast it was over and done, and they were gone, and yeah, we were just bummed. My body miscarried, like they said, and from there we just really kind of just did a lot of talking and praying and trying to figure out where we were going to go from there. Obviously there's pros and cons to both traditional and embryo adoption, and so we kind of, you know, just went back and forth on deciding what we were going to do, and in the end we came back to embryo adoption and just really felt like that was still God's plan for our family, and he had a special plan for one of those little embryos. And so, yeah, off we went, and we started the matching process again. Our second set of embryos, well, like the first, we still had felt like we didn't want more embryos than we knew we would transfer at one time. And so for us personally, that number was still 2. But this round looked a little different in the idea that we actually adopted a single embryo from 2 different families. And so we still had 2 embryos, but they actually were not genetically related like our previous set had been. They both were at the same stage when they were frozen, which was day 6. And that was the important part, because that way they could be transferred together. But yes, they weren't genetically related. So, and from there, I think our transfer looked pretty similar to our first transfer. We did another natural cycle transfer and went in on transfer day, and we actually were told that both embryos had survived the thaw. And but they also had said that our embryos were not re-expanding. They said that I guess when they freeze them, an embryo kind of shrinks down a little bit, and they said that when they're thawed, a healthy embryo should essentially kind of puff back up, or what they call re-expand, and neither had started doing that at the time of the transfer, and so that wasn't a very good sign. But they said sometimes that happens after the transfer is done, and so obviously we transferred both anyways, and once again just hoped and prayed for the best. And I think, to be honest, I think at that point we really had kind of thought that it might just be over and that neither would make it. And we were kind of, yeah, we were hopeful and prayerful, but yeah, I'm not sure we, thought it was going to happen. And we did our blood draw, which I think was a little over a week later, and once again had another confirmed pregnancy. We were shocked. I remember that, and I remember my numbers were actually pretty low again, and they actually were worried that I would end in another chemical pregnancy, and so they had us come back 2 days later again for another blood draw, and my numbers had actually tripled, and so which was a fantastic sign. And so at that point we were very excited, very hopeful, and yeah, our doctor had basically left it at that point as we'll do an ultrasound at 6 weeks and check for a heartbeat. And so, of course, that seemed to take forever and a day, but it finally came, and we were thrilled when we seen that little heartbeat. We were bummed because we were hoping for 2, but thrilled to see the one just the same. So. And then they had us come back about a week later for another ultrasound just to confirm that all was still looking good and baby was developing at the rate it should, and it was, and it looked perfect, and yeah, we were just so excited. Fast forward, and in September we found out we're having a girl, which is super exciting because we have 3 boys and 1 girl right now, and so our daughter is pretty thrilled she finally gets a sister. And yeah, here we are with only a month to go until we get to meet her. So we can't wait. We're really excited. We will have to do genetic testing once she's here, because if you remember right, we had transferred 2 embryos and from 2 different families, and so we don't know which one made it. And so until she's born, we won't know that, and so it sounds like they'll just do a saliva test, and we will find out who the genetic family is at that point. And yeah, I think that concludes our story.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. We're so excited for you guys and to see pictures of Everly. I know I'm so excited to see pictures of Everly, so I'm sure you guys are more so. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and let switch over the slides, and we have Mike and Michelle sharing their story next. So I will go ahead and let them get started on their story. Mike and Michelle were married in 2000, and they started the adoption process in 2013. So I'll go ahead and let them share.
Kathryn, that was really awesome. I mean, I know we're in this, mode also, but, it just touches my heart to hear other people's, stories about how, God kind of led them, to embryo adoption. And, so thank you. That was awesome. I was fighting back the tears as you were talking. But yeah, so we want to share our story too, and what brought us to embryo adoption. And I think first and foremost, I think Mike and I would both agree 100% that there is no way that we ever would have been able to make our way to embryo adoption if it wasn't for the Lord, leading us. There's no way that we would have been able to, handle what we had to go through before we got to embryo adoption without him, and there's no way that we would have found it without him. We basically, in 2004, we had been diagnosed with, I had been diagnosed with tubal issues. And they told us pretty much from the beginning, our best chance at having a family would be IVF. At that time, and really throughout the 10 years that we struggled with infertility, we talked about IVF so many different times, so many different ways, and it changed. The process changed over the 10 years that we were going through it, and at no time did we ever have any peace. We just knew that was not the right road for us. What Mike and I opted to do, we had several surgeries to try to open and repair my tubes, but ultimately what that led to was 2 miscarriages and 4 ectopic pregnancies, and then ultimately I had both tubes removed. So really, on it was New Year's Eve 2012, I had to be admitted into the hospital to have an emergency surgery to remove the 2nd tube. So here we were, it was New Year's Eve. I had to have emergency surgery, and I can remember leaving the hospital, and we were we were upset. I don't want to, discount that, but we knew at that moment, we just knew God had something for us. We didn't know at that time exactly what it was going to be, but we knew he had something for us. We knew that, even though all hope in the natural seemed to be gone, but we knew he had something. So it was at that time, that was, like I said, it was New Year's, or it was New Year's Day. Before the end of January, we just knew that adoption was going to be the answer for us. So we just started doing research, and we went onto the Focus on the Family website, and I found snowflakes. And I remember sitting there thinking, this is amazing. This is the most amazing thing. This is absolutely the answer for us. Embryo adoption is absolutely the answer for us. And I remember sending Mike a text saying, what would you think of giving birth to your adopted child? And I don't know, Mike, you tell him what your thought was.
That was where I was going to start talking.
Okay.
Because it was. First, I had to digest the text. I said, how do we do that? Because it was just something that blew my mind. And, of course, Michelle went on to explain a little more about it. And as we've heard so many times, we just didn't even understand that this was something that was possible, that was something that was out there. And just as God led us through this process, he really put a spotlight on this, on embryo adoption for us. And we knew that this was it. Out of all the years that we, had the highs and lows of going through the fertility struggle and, being pregnant and losing pregnancies and so on and so forth, this was the first time that we understood that I started to could see the end. I could see our child. I could see us having a child. And I never realized that I couldn't really see that before. But, you know, we just knew it was it. I knew, wow, I got a lot of stuff to do around the house and get it ready for a baby. I mean, even at that early stage, we knew that, and it was such a rapid. Once we said yes, this is the way to go. It was really just a, you know, we knew we got to get engaged in this. Let's go. Let's move forward, and from there on out, I'll let Michelle tell some of that story about how we moved forward at that time.
Okay. Well, the first thing that I really wanted to share with everyone is, you know, I don't know if it was our exuberance or I'm not exactly sure where we went wrong at this point, but we went with the wrong adoption agency to begin with. We wasted valuable time, you know, kind of, you know, waiting for them to match us, and I really just wanted to kind of, you know, share, you know, some of the things that, I don't know, that might have been, you know, red lights for us had we known. And I think those two things are, you know, there was a lack of communication kind of coming out of the agency, and I think the other thing was they had also asked us to pay them half up front before they actually did anything for us. You know, so once we got engaged with them, you know, it was very difficult to make the decision to leave. You know, we had already invested, you know, time with them, and we thought, well, gosh, if we rip up the seed now, we're going to have to plant it somewhere else, and it's going to take time to get established. It was a very difficult decision. So I can't stress enough, finding the right agency is paramount. But ultimately, after 6 months, Mike and I, we had talked about it. We had been, you know, interviewing another agency through, you know, as we were trying to make the decision so that we wouldn't make another mistake. We did ultimately switch, and from that point, once we switched, after we got through all the preliminary, the application, and, you know, making sure our home study was still going to be acceptable in the new agency, we got matched pretty quick. I want to say it was probably within about a week. And I remember, it was pretty quick, right? And I remember getting the email and getting all the information, and Mike and I took the time and we were looking at everything, and I remember thinking, for me, I'm like, how could we possibly get matched to, how could we possibly accept the first family that we got matched to? I guess I was thinking, you know, that there was going to be like a curve, you know, like a matching curve somehow. So I think, you know, my inclination was to reject the first match just on principle alone. But, you know, Mike and I, we had kind of said, all right, we have a week to make the decision. So, you know, we're not going to talk about our thoughts or our feelings with one another until we get a little closer. You know, this is a big thing. It's a big decision. We're going to, you know, read through the information that we've been provided, and we're going to digest it all, and then we're going to come together and we're going to share our thoughts after a few days. And it was amazing what took place over those couple of days. Mike, why don't you share?
Yeah, like Michelle said, we had just come out of a 6-month waiting period where really nothing happened, and then we changed agencies, and next thing you know, in a week, there's a match, and we both thought, wow, these are definitely the people for us. This is the family for us. There's no doubt about it. But we didn't want to say that to influence each other. So that's why we said, all right, let's wait a couple of days, and then we'll talk about it again, revisit it, let God work in our hearts a little bit. And certainly when we came back together, we were like, this is the family. This is the family for us. It's we so knew it. We knew it right from the beginning, but we just wanted to tiptoe in and use the week that we had to make the decision. And we knew, so you know, we said yes, and of course they have to accept us. So we were kind of waiting for that to happen, but that happened quickly as well.
Well, no, they accepted us first. Yeah, they accepted us first. Yeah.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah. Yep. So once we said yes, once it was solidified in our hearts that this was the family, then, you know, from that point going forward, it was really just logistical, you know, figuring out how are we, you know, the communication, are we going to be open with them, you know, and it started out that we were just communicating through the adoption agency. You know, I think as time went on, as we went through the legal process, you kind of get a feel for the other side that you're negotiating with. Not that there was much negotiation, but you kind of get a feel for who you're dealing with. And eventually, we have exchanged email addresses with the family that we got matched with, and we're building a relationship with them. I think we're taking it very slow. You know, I think we're kind of feeling each other out. It's, you know, I think we both kind of understand how important it is. So nobody wants to kind of overstep their bounds. So we're kind of just feeling each other out. But we feel really good about who we've been matched with, and you know, and for the future, you know, for our children, you know, our daughter now, and we're hoping to have, we were matched with a family that had 4 embryos. So when we got pregnant, we transferred 1 embryo, and we got pregnant the first time. So we have 3 embryos remaining. So we're hoping to have more children. So we know that it's important to us, for our children, that we, you know, have a good relationship with the genetic family, because it's going to be important to them. That's our feeling. So yeah, so then in the process, we went through the legal process. You know, there's the paperwork that goes back and forth, and, you know, we had originally gotten permission to travel to our embryos in the state that they were in. It turned out that their clinic did not want to work with us, which was a little surprising, but we just said, okay, well, fine, we'll move the embryos to our clinic. So that's what we did. We went through the transfer process. Unfortunately, I had to do all the, you know, the injections and the, you know, the medications and everything. I wish that I could have been like Kathryn. I was, you know, I thought that was just wonderful, Kathryn, that you were able to do a natural cycle. What a gift. But yeah, I had to go through the shots and everything, and we went through the transfer process, and like Kathryn, about 10 days later, I had a pregnancy test, and it confirmed that we were pregnant. And then a few weeks later, I think, we went back and we got to see her heartbeat, and really from that moment on, it was just, I mean, it was, it's just been, it was such an amazing process to be able to be pregnant with her, and to, you know, to have her, you know, grow inside of me, and to be able to give birth, and you know, to breastfeed her, and, you know, just all the ultrasounds. It was just such an amazing gift.
Absolutely.
Yeah, from beginning to end. You know, we were very blessed. I had a very good pregnancy, very healthy. She was born, she was born 42 weeks and 2 days. I went with her. So she almost didn't want to come out, but when she came out with a yell. She was very happy about it. But yeah, so she's a very happy, beautiful, wonderful child, and we're you know, in the process right now of making plans to have our next transfer. So we're really excited about that. So we're just very, very grateful for embryo adoption. It has completely changed our life.
It has, and if I could just drop back just for 1 minute to how God really, it's just amazing what He can do. Out of all the embryos, out of all the earth, what's going on, that He has the right embryo, the right family for us. And we so knew that as the time went on, before, obviously before the transfer, as the time went on, and we, you know, we had pictures of the family and so on and so forth, and we looked at them, and we realized that we're in love with these people. This is a connection that's beyond anything that we could have ever expected. And when Alora, who is our daughter, came in to the room on the transfer day, they brought her in whatever the, you know, the kind
of like a syringe.
yeah. And we knew. I mean, it was instant, like, wow, our child is here in the room.
She entered the room.
And it wasn't, she entered the room as if anybody, any grown person would enter the room. We knew they were there. We knew she was there, and it was something we didn't expect, and we just understood that, you know, this is so amazing. At every step of the way, you know, God puts his fingerprints on all of it. He puts his stamp on the whole thing. And it's so encouraging to know that, you know, no matter what, he has an answer for you.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, so that's our story. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Mike and Michelle. I love that, just everything you guys talked about. And that's such a cute picture of Laura with the leaves and everywhere. That's just adorable.
Yeah.
All of them are very cute.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. All right, so our next family I'm going to open it up for is Travis and Annette. I will unmute them real quickly, too. Travis and Annette were married in 2002 and first adopted in 2007. So you can see a picture from that. So I will go ahead and let you guys get started. I know you guys have been in the news before, and so I've heard a little bit of your story, but not in person.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah. And thanks, Kathryn and Michelle. It is tons of fun to hear people's story, and we love to share our story, and we've been blessed with the opportunity to share it a few different times. Just most recently, the local news did do a story about us for National Adoption Day, so that was really kind of fun to be able to share our family with everybody and spread the news of embryo adoption and just adoption in general. Travis and I, like Deborah said, we were married in 2002, but before we got married, we knew that we would grow our family through adoption. Travis had leukemia as a child, and because of that, he was left infertile. So we just knew going into it that this would be the process that we would take. So as we started exploring that process, our first choice was to do an international adoption. We were really scared at the idea of having an open adoption and having a relationship with families outside of our own, which somewhat geared us towards that international adoption option. So we chose Guatemala, and we had a good process with that, but I would say with any international adoptions, I came to call them speed bumps, and we hit a lot of speed bumps along the way. So just when you thought you were cruising down the road and things were going great, then the government would jump in and cause a little glitch. So Cornelius is now 9, and he came home in February of 2007, and he's just a great joy. And after that adoption was complete, we knew that we wanted more kids in our family. So several years later, we started talking and thinking about what our next step would be. And Guatemala closed their adoptions about 6 months after Cornelius was home from Guatemala, so we could not go back to Guatemala. Otherwise, that probably would have been our first choice, is to turn around and go back and do that process again. So then we started considering other international adoptions and what our options were there, and it's a long process, and it's a process full of a lot of unknowns. And I'm an accountant by trade, and control and having things in order is part of my personality. So it really tested me to do the international adoption, and then to try to do it a second time was pushing me way outside my comfort zone. So then that's when we were reintroduced to embryo adoption. I was actually first introduced to embryo adoption when I was in college. A good friend of mine had mentioned that she had heard a series about it on Focus on the Family, and she's just like, this would be the coolest thing for Travis and you. And so that's how we first heard about embryo adoption, and then just kind of put it on the back burner. And then as we were, again, exploring kind of what our next option would be, our home study facility, they had suggested that we consider embryo adoption. So much like Michelle and Mike, we took a lot of time in prayer and research and consideration, and just try to decide, is embryo adoption right for our family? My family is Catholic and very strong Catholic faith, and so I know that some Catholics have different feelings about in vitro fertilization. So it took a little bit of extra research for us to consider whether or not that embryo adoption would fall in line with that, and we found several articles that made my parents agree with our decision that embryo adoption was a good fit, and one that wasn't against their beliefs and their faith. So anyways, so we did go ahead and we went forward with the embryo adoption. We were first matched with a family. They had 4 embryos, and much like Michelle, we got to do the shots and all of that fun stuff in order to prepare for the transfer. Of the 4 embryos, only 2 had survived the thaw. And so we went in and had the procedure done, and then neither of the embryos attached, so we had a negative pregnancy test from that. I remember feeling a great sense of loss at that point. First of all, for the embryos that didn't even survive the thaw. And you're prepared for that, but not really prepared for that. And I was a little bit shocked at how much loss I felt at that time. And then again, when the first pregnancy test came back negative, never have really been in a position to have even taken a pregnancy test. This was my first exposure to that, to the ups and downs of, I guess, of infertility. So that was just kind of a new loss for us. So then we were matched with a second family. They had 4 embryos as well. And again, only 2 of the 4 embryos had survived the thaw. So we went in for that procedure and had the embryo transfer. This time, it was a successful transfer, but only one of the embryos had attached, and that resulted in our second child, Corbin. And Corbin is now 4, and he is just a joy for our family, and just really fun. One of the neat things about Corbin's genetics is he is 100% Mexican. We actually, for his actual embryo transfer, our clinic decided that they would not accept the embryos to be shipped to the clinic here in Nebraska. So at that point, we were forced to make a choice. Did we abandon the embryos, or do we find out whether or not we could actually travel to the embryos to the clinic where they were created to do the transfer there? So we opted to go ahead and to travel to the embryos, and they were in El Paso, Texas. And so being a border town, his genetic parents actually live in Juarez, and came over to El Paso to have the IVF procedures done, and then have the remaining embryos stored in El Paso. One of the things, and we don't know, but some of the research that we had done was that there could be better odds if you go to the clinic that created and froze the embryos to have the transfer done. And just with that was that they said that then they can exactly reverse the process of procedures that were used to freeze the embryos originally, because each clinic has kind of slightly different procedures that they use, although it's mostly the same. There are always slight differences. So at that point, it was 2011. We had 2 beautiful boys, and they were fantastic and full of life. But we knew we still wanted to continue to grow our family. We had always desired to have a larger family. So then that's when we decided that we would start the process again. So we decided to do another embryo adoption with snowflakes again. And So we started that process in probably early 2013, and we were matched. We were matched with another family, and they only had 2 embryos. And for us, considering the process that we went through to get Corbin, you know, at least 8 embryos, and that resulted in 1 Corbin. When we were matched with a family who only had 2 embryos, we were a little bit concerned. So, kind of like Kathryn's story, we went ahead and we went out and we searched for another family to match with, just in case the thawing process didn't result in an embryo that could be transferred. After going through all the meds and all the doctor's appointments, one of the things that we didn't want to go to is to that appointment the day of the transfer and find out that none of the embryos were available to even be transferred. So that's where we wanted to increase our odds with that. You know, again, it comes down to, you know, making decisions and knowing what you're comfortable with. Kathryn talked about how that they were comfortable with only, you know, 2 embryos to carry to term. We decided our number was 3, that we would carry 3 embryos to term would be feasible for us. And the way it was described to us is that embryos are frozen in straws, and so at any point in time we would have the choice of how many straws of embryos we wanted to have unfrozen at any point in time. And the first family who we were matched with, both of their embryos were frozen in 1 straw, and then the second family who we were eventually matched with, they had 2 embryos as well, and they were also frozen in 1 straw. So we just had to make decisions and talk with the clinic at that time for that. So we had an embryo transfer, and we used the first family who we were matched with. In this case, we actually found a couple who was half Puerto Rican and then half white, and so we were excited to go ahead and kind of keep some of that Hispanic, Latino mix going through our family, but unfortunately, well, fortunately, both embryos did survive the thaw in that case, but unfortunately, neither of the embryos attached during that process. So again, resulted in an unsuccessful transfer. That was transfer number 3. So that left us with the 2 other embryos, which were from the second genetic family who we had connected with. And so we went and we had that transfer done in January of 2014. That transfer was incredibly successful. We had 2 embryos. 2 embryos survived the thaw and 2 embryos attached. And so we are now the proud parents of twin girls, Cadence and Coralie. So the other couple things I wanted to share just a little bit about is, you know, we made the choice to travel to the embryos, both for Corbin and then also now for the twins. We traveled to the clinics where they were created to do the embryo transfer, and you know, that was just a really positive experience for us, and it forced us to take that to get out of town and to take that time, that downtime, and do a little bit of rest and not jump back into life as quickly. You know, some of the downsides to that is it does take more time to travel, and then it, you know, adds additional cost to that, but we weren't afraid of that piece of it. After doing the international adoption, it was just, you know, to travel, it kind of makes our story a little bit more full and complete, which is kind of fun for us and for our family. We do have a relationship with the girls' genetic family, and actually with the girls, their genetic, well, we call them the genetic family. It is the genetic dad who we have a relationship with. He's genetic dad, and then they had a donor for the egg. So although we have a relationship with mom and dad, we don't know who the egg donor was. other than just very minimal profile information on that. And it's just been fun to build that relationship and to really be able to share our story and the story of the twins back with them. And I think that they have been very fulfilled with being able to have some of the information and to know that the girls are loved and get to see the joy and their and that sort of process. They actually, through their IVF procedure, they had twins as well, and their twins are 5. And so it is fun to also have another family to share twin stories with, because that's just a fun, unique, new adventure all on its own. And that's pretty much our story.
Yeah, thank you so much, Annette. I didn't quite get to the third slide. I forgot to switch it over, but I just love hearing just the whole story, how everything happened, and it's so exciting. This is such a cute picture, by the way, the little cake smash party. That's one of the cutest pictures I've ever seen. Well, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for the Q&A time. I know I've got a couple questions in. So I'm just going to leave it on this slide really quickly. So if anybody has any questions for how to submit, this would be how you submit your questions. It's going to be down on the lower right-hand side of the screen. All right, and while you guys are typing in your questions, I'm just going to let you know about some upcoming events as well. So on Wednesday, January 27th, this is going to be an evening webinar at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We have our webinar, Embryo Donation and Adoption Open Mic Night, and this is going to be a webinar both for potential embryo donors and embryo adopters, where they can just come and ask any questions that they have about the embryo adoption process. So any and all questions are welcome there. We just have a brief introduction that explains the process a little bit, and then we just open up the floor for any questions. And then I also want to invite anybody to check out our magazine, Pathway to Family. You can find that at www.pathwaytofamily.org, and we have a new version coming out in the next week or so. So I'm very excited about that. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody for questions. And the first one that we had come in is, we have 3 children through embryo donation and live in Edmonton, Canada, and have never met any other families who have done an embryo donation. Is there a network of families that we could connect with online to get to know other families like us? And I know that there are some Facebook groups that you could actually find as well. I'm going to include some follow-up information about that after the webinar in the follow-up email. But I'm not sure if any of you guys know some other groups. I know that you can also contact your adoption agency that you worked with or the agency that you work with and see if they have their own group for you to work with or things like that.
We're not part of any groups.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know of any either.
Okay,
yeah, same here.
I will go ahead in the follow-up email just provide a couple links to resources that you can look into to help you be able to connect with a network. All right, the next one is for Kathryn specifically. How did you explain to your biological children that you wanted to adopt, and did you take your kids' opinions into consideration?
Yes, well, when we adopted our 4th child, they were pretty young. I don't know how much they even, at that time, our 3 biological kids were 4, 3, and 2. And so at that point, I don't think they understood fully even. And it's just always kind of been there. And then with embryo adoption, we had told them that we were, they were thrilled when we heard we were adopting again. And so that's never been an issue. And so, yeah, and then we told them kind of the process of it, and they were even more excited that, oh, wow, we get to, you know, feel our new baby sissy in mommy's belly. And, yeah, they've just been thrilled from the beginning. So, yeah.
Yeah, of course. All right. Our next question, how long did it take each of you to be matched? And you can just jump in. Share.
It took us a week, you know, from, like I said, from the time that we went through all of the administrative stuff, you know, going through the home study and the application. Once all of that stuff was all finished, you know, the true matching period was really about a week.
As I say, ours was very fast as well. I'd say on both of ours, about a week or two, just for the actual match.
And this is Annette, and I would agree it was probably within a week or two. The twins took just slightly longer to find a second match for us, and then, you know, I think that was probably the longest one for us because the genetic mom really wanted to make sure that she was making a good match. So we conversed for quite I'd say maybe a week or so before they decided to go ahead and match, that they wanted to match with us after we had said we wanted to match with them.
Yeah. And with snowflakes, usually the matching process is going to happen in between just that 1 to 4 months. Usually you're going to see your first match within that first month is what they're trying, but it all does depend on preferences that you have and preferences the donating family has. But oftentimes they can go very quickly like that.
I wanted to share just a little bit about the question to Kathryn. This is Annette again, just talking about, you know, sharing with our older kids about adoption and stuff like that. We've always been really open with all of our kids. Cornelius knows he's adopted from Guatemala, and we've just always made it part of our everyday conversation. When we were pregnant with the girls, we started to explain to Corbin how he was adopted and how it was different from how Cornelius was adopted. And we spent a lot of time kind of talking about the differences between those, but really how it's, you know, it's the same but different. And Corbin, in his fantastic 4-year-old mind, when we first used the term snowflake, he could just imagine himself just falling into my belly, and it was just a real sweet moment that you could see this whole frozen picture running through his mind. So.
Okay. Next question. Do all of the embryo adoptions need to be open adoptions? Also, Michelle mentioned finding the correct agency. How do you find an agency that work with embryo adoption? And if you guys can share what you think about that, I can also jump in as well.
Initially, the family that we were matched to, they had initially not wanted to have an open adoption. And we were okay with that. I think it was more important to us to be matched to the right family and to respect, you know, their wishes. But then, like I said, as we went through the legal process, we both kind of felt like, you know, maybe we'd like to get to know each other. We'd like to at least have an open avenue to get to know each other. And that was a decision that each of us, you know, each side made. But no, I don't believe that they have to be open. When we, you know, that was something that we were specifically asked by the agency, you know, what level of openness we were comfortable with. And at no time, they encouraged openness, but at no time did we feel like if we weren't open that they weren't going to match us or work with us.
Yeah. This is Annette again. For Corbin, our adoption is completely closed. We got the initial kind of background information and maybe 3 pictures of his genetic family, and then we don't have anything in addition to that. In fact, the only thing that they know is genetic dad wanted to know if it was a boy or girl, so he knows that a baby boy was born in 2011. Genetic mom didn't want to know anything. And then for the girls, we actually have a really strong relationship with the genetic family there. And that, like I said at the very beginning, we chose international adoption because we were afraid of that openness. And now, to some extent, I long for the openness that I won't have for Cornelius and Corbin that I do have with the girls' genetic family because it's just been a really great experience for us.
And And I would say for us, we aren't totally sure yet, just because we don't know which embryo made it, and one of our families wanted no contact, and the other one is possibly open to it in the future. And so until she's born and we even know, which genetic family she came from, then we're kind of just sitting back and waiting. But we were kind of up for whatever, whether it would be open or closed. That was never something, we said no to if they didn't want it or whatever. So we were just up for whatever.
Mm-hmm. And Deborah, was that a two-part question? Do we answer both parts?
Yes, you can. The other one was, how do you find an agency that will work with embryo adoption, which I'm not sure if you guys track them down separately. I'm assuming that's for the home study.
Well, no, we had initially found both agencies through embryoadoption.org. I believe, I know it was when we were looking, there was a list of all agencies, and it kind of gave a like bullet point synopsis of, what their bylines were, or what they kind of, how they went about the process. So that's how we found both agencies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a list available. So if you're looking for a specific state, we can say, okay, this agency has worked with embryo adoption before, and you could look into them. So that's definitely a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The next question is actually more about some specifics. So I will go ahead and follow up about that question about the clinic and agency in New York. Snowflakes itself is a nationwide program, so you would be able to work with them. The question was, is there a Snowflake agency or clinic in the New York area? So Snowflakes is nationwide, and so we are able to work with families in New York, of course, and I can give you a follow-up email about that. The next question is, can you also discuss the costs of embryo adoption? Whoever wants to jump in.
I don't remember the exact total in the end, but I do know it was about half of what our traditional adoption was, which definitely is nice.
I'm trying to even remember. Go ahead.
This is Annette, and the cost is much more manageable than an international adoption. But then the cost of actually doing the transfer, that varies from clinic to clinic, and then the number of transfers that you have to do in order for a successful pregnancy. So it's somewhat more variable from that perspective. But otherwise, I think that the costs are pretty reasonable.
Yeah, I would say one difference between the international and the embryo. The embryo tends to go pretty fast, so most of those expenses happen pretty quickly around the same time. Whereas with our international, it was over years. So those costs were spread over a much wider area.
I'm pretty sure, we ultimately wound up adopting through Snowflakes, and I'm pretty sure that all their costs are broken down on their website. I want to say, after the home study, I want to say it was maybe like $8,000, and then plus the transfer amount, which again, that varies. And I think our home study was, from beginning to end, maybe, a few thousand, but I'm sorry, I can't be a little bit more specific than that.
Oh, yeah, that's no problem. I can also send a link in the follow-up email that will include the exact cost, but you're right. It's the Snowflake's cost is at $8,000 plus, then, of course, those variable costs of however much the transfer is going to be in the home study itself. All right, the next question, how open are your relationships with the genetic families?
Well, I think I had shared, that we're in the process of building a relationship. We've never actually spoken to the genetic family either on the phone or face-to-face. Up to this point, our communication has really been through email. But, like I said, we're, Alora, our daughter, is 10 months old, so we really haven't been, it's really only been, less than 2 years since we've been matched to this family. So we've just kind of been taking it slow and just getting to know each other. And, their children are still fairly young. And, of course, like I said, Alora's 10 months, so I don't think we want to overwhelm any of the children with, introducing them too quickly. I think we kind of want to feel all of them out and let our, I know we want to let, our daughter and our other children kind of let us know about, their desire and readiness about meeting them. So, everybody's young, so there's no rush. So that's kind of where we're at. We're just taking it slow.
Mm-hmm. All right. I just have one more note. That was actually about the cost, and it said from a donor perspective, the cost is about the same as doing costs for a fresh IVF cycle, which is pretty true, yeah. And there are, of course, the variable costs, so it does depend. Then one more question: should a home study be done before contacting snowflakes? And I can answer that. No, you don't need to have a home study completed before contacting snowflakes. It does speed up the process if you already have one, because some families have gone through the adoption process already, and it's something that is just already available for them, but you can contact Snowflakes, look into the process, look into it being something that, if it's the right option or not for you, and then consider doing the home study after that process. So it doesn't have to be done right away. All right. I don't see any other questions, and it's about 3 minutes after the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and close it up. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and we just appreciate hearing the stories. It's really fun to hear how you guys are doing. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Bye.